call the meeting back to order. We have 5 items on the agenda for Committee of the Whole. The first item is our annual update from the Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission Against Domestic Violence.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Susan Marks, and I'm the director of the Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission Against Domestic Violence, and I think several of you have heard me give these updates before. And for those of you who haven't heard me or may have forgotten, I have a tendency to speak very quickly, and it tends to speed up as the presentation goes on, so I'll start out at an okay pace, but by the end I'll be going very quickly. So if you can't understand what I'm saying, please ask me to slow down. I think I've received that on as an evaluation on every single presentation I've ever received in my entire life, from the time I think I was a child. So, a little bit about the commission. We are a joint City of Bellingham and Whatcom County Commission formed in 1998 by a joint resolution. So part of my giving the annual updates to all of you is because we are a commission that serves this city and serves all of you and serves your interest in this community. In 2006, all of the other municipalities in Whatcom County passed ordinances of support, so we are here to serve every jurisdiction in Whatcom County, but obviously we are specifically formed by the city and the county and have an interest there. And our mission is to provide leadership in our community's efforts to prevent and reduce domestic violence. And that really looks like there's 2 prongs to our work. And one is when a domestic violence incident happens, when someone's experienced domestic violence, it's ensuring that the way our community and our systems respond is the best possible way to provide safety and healing for survivors and their children and to provide accountability for the perpetrators. So we're looking at that systems and community response. And then the other level that we look at is this broad-based community awareness, trying to get the average community member to know a little about domestic violence, what our local resources are, and how they can prevent domestic violence in the future. Our funding, as part of being formed by the City of Bellingham-Whatcom County, is due to our primary funders for our general operations, and then we get a little bit of funding from the City of Ferndale as well. From the City of Bellingham, we get approximately $54,000, exactly $54,000 a year, actually, and we're very grateful for that. I would say one thing that we're looking at is currently this model, as you're probably aware, getting government funding is not really sustainable in the long term, so our commissions and executive committee is looking at how to bring in possibly other sources of funding to build up that base of general operations. So it's possible at some point we'd be asking for ideas related to that. We also have had funding related to special projects. We have 2 grants currently from the U.S. Department of Justice. And one, this grants to encourage arrest policies, is systems, criminal justice and civil justice systems-based. And we've actually had this grant since 2005. We're in our 5th round of receiving this grant, and the City of Bellingham is actually the applicant and the fiscal agent, and then they contract with us to provide some of the services. The Bellingham Police Department provides that service for us in applying. And then we also have a grant with the Ferndale School District to address dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking in secondary schools, and that's a pilot project. We were one of 9 chosen in the country, and that grant, we've had it for about 3.5 years. It's closing out in September, and we have applied for continuation funds for that one. So we've got some of that funding, which helps us to have more of an impact in Whatcom County. And then we have commission members from the City of Bellingham, Chief Cook, Peter Affato, and Darlene Peterson. One of the things that we greatly appreciate is by virtue of their roles in the city that they are allowed to participate in the commission and given time to participate in our efforts and to participate in our commission, and definitely having that high level of staff participation is what we're about. It's about having the leaders come together and come up with resolutions to the problems related to domestic violence. We definitely appreciate that. And then the city approves 6 different community members, nominates 6 community members to the commission as well. And so currently we have Darla Woolman from the Family Care Network, Tara Neverett from the Washington State Bar Association, Sherry Emerson from the Opportunity Council, Greg Winter from the Homeless Service Center, Rick Walls from Fountain Community Church, and Katie Plewa from Western Washington University are our current city community appointees. And then you have in your packets a full roster. We have other government appointees who serve by virtue of their position, and then the county appoints 6 community members as well. So I just want to talk to you a little bit. We have a new strategic plan, so I just want to let you know what our focus is going to be for the next few years. It went into effect in January, and our commission spent a lot of time last year working on where we wanted to focus over the next few years. We have 4 primary goals, and the first one is to engage the community to prevent domestic violence, then to promote best practices in our community response, to increase capacity to address children and youth impacted by domestic violence, and then there's a typo there, to explore an expansion to include sexual violence. And today I'm just going to talk about the first 3. Those are the 3 we're in the process of. The next one likely will be on our agenda for the full commission next year. We're considering looking at, currently we're focused on intimate partner violence and looking at sexual assault when it occurs outside of a relationship. And so we will be doing some research and providing recommendations to the city and county councils and mayor and county executive, because it's actually your decision what our focus and mission is. So we'll just provide those recommendations to you all. So likely within the next year, year and a half, we'll be considering that and what impact that would have on our community and our work. So our first goal, I just want to give you an example of what we're working on with each goal so you can get a sense. We're working on several projects related to each one. So the first one is to engage the community to prevent domestic violence through increasing public consciousness of its impact, local resources, and effective interventions. So we want people to know what is happening related to domestic violence in the community, where can they go if they know someone experiencing it, and what can they do as an individual with people that they know related to domestic violence. So an example of this, we have been working actually for a couple years on developing a toolkit for faith communities to respond to domestic violence, and so we have come very close to having a final product that we're going to pilot this summer. We're going to be accepting 2 or 3 faith communities into our pilot, and this toolkit has statistics about domestic violence in Whatcom County, myths and facts related to domestic violence, what are some signs and different types of abuse, and then it has ideas for what do you do if you know a survivor, what do you do if you know a child who's impacted by domestic violence, and what do you do if you know someone who's being abusive. And then it has a lot of different resources for faith communities, such as sample sermons, training videos, curriculum to work with youth groups, things you can include in marriage preparation classes to address histories of abuse and future of the relationship. So, and we have an evaluation that we've also developed to go along with this. So this summer we'll be piloting it, we'll be evaluating it, and then changing as needed. And then hopefully within the next 6 to 8 months we'll be launching it more community-wide. Then our next goal is to promote best practices in the community response, focusing on high risk and high lethality domestic violence. And this goal is really about recognizing our limited resources in this community. We really needed to focus on the highest risk offenders and the highest risk survivors of domestic violence, where there's most likely for serious assault or lethality, death. So we have actually in our current grant through the Department of Justice is to focus on these high-risk cases. And so in November, we started this domestic violence high-risk response team, and we had a multidisciplinary team for several years helping us research what risk assessment was in Whatcom County, where we wanted to go, what are best practices. And they found a model in Massachusetts that is a town similar size to Bellingham, a lot of similar demographics, and they have their team's been going 8 to 10 years, and they've had 0 domestic violence homicides in that time. And before that, like Whatcom County, they'd had kind of a stretch of almost every year, at least 1 or 2 homicides. And so we have brought this model into our county and changed a little bit to meet more of our needs and the needs of our jurisdiction, our laws. And this team is made up of primarily different representatives from criminal justice personnel. We also have a representative from DVSAS, Victim Advocacy, and then we can pull in partners like Child Protection Services or other the hospital. We've pulled them as needed. And this team is focused on offenders. This is the thing that's coolest about this is most of the work we do, we're trying to keep victims safe, which is super important. But one of the things we found in our domestic violence movement is it's a revolving door, and so as long as one person gets safe and leaves that relationship, that offender will find another partner who will become their next victim. And so it's about stopping the offenders. And so this team looks at referrals for high-risk offenders. They decide if they're going to accept them, and then when they do, they increase their monitoring, they increase their action plans related to this person. Each team member comes up with their own plan based on their own agency and their own policies and procedures and what they're able to do. But it's a whole community sharing information and monitoring this person at a higher level to prevent them from committing further acts of domestic violence. And so we're brand new, so we're just starting to collect data, but we hope within a year or so to have some of our own data related to how it's working in Whatcom County and to continue doing that over the years. The next thing we want to do is increase our capacity in the community to address domestic violence as it impacts children and youth. And this is also about that revolving door and that prevention piece as, again, our community does a great job with victim services and the way that many of our agencies respond to victims when they come in. And we haven't really seen our numbers of domestic violence reports to law enforcement or victims or any of those go down. And what we want to do is stop these incidents before they start. We want to stop offenders before they get a new victim, and we want to stop children before they start engaging in unhealthy relationships. So an example of something we're doing in this area is with our grant with the Ferndale School District, we have groups of youth that we're working with who are advising our work, and they came up with the idea to have a one-day conference or summit for youth throughout Whatcom County. And so we are working with this leadership team from the Ferndale School District to plan a full-day conference. It's in September. It's on September 29th. And we're going to be recruiting one team. Our goal is to have one team from every single middle and high school in Whatcom County attend. And these students chose this theme, Our Gender Revolution. It's a theme that was come up with, a curriculum developed by youth in Idaho who work with Idaho Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, and it's focused on increasing gender equity and reducing gender violence. So it's really focused on those root causes of domestic violence. And so we're actually going to have youth come out from the Idaho Coalition and do a keynote speech. We're going to have students from Western, from their anti-violence program, give a speech, and we're going to have some other community agencies do some presentations. At the end of the day, the youth are all going to work with their advisors to come up with an action plan for their school and go back to their schools with their advisors and implement those action plans to try to change culture within their schools. So it's taking what we've been doing in Ferndale and bringing it broader into the other districts in the community. So those are just, like I said, in each of those categories, we have 3 or 4 different projects, but I just wanted to give you a sampling. I didn't think you wanted to listen to all of them for time, and also to get a sense of what it means to do the community response, what it means to do the community awareness work. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm open
any
to
questions
those.
for Susan? Dan?
That was a great presentation. I finally met someone who talks faster than I do.
I was talking slow, actually.
I wanted to check in with one of the points that you made about this community in Massachusetts where they drove the numbers down to 0. Is there just quickly a salient point that they did, or was there some activity that they did?
I think the primary thing that they've said was coming together and sharing information, so identifying people together and sharing that information. And actually, one of the reasons we chose this team is a few years ago we did a domestic violence fatality review in Whatcom County, and one of the biggest findings when we were done with that fatality review is we realized all these agencies who came together at this table to do the review after the death had a lot of information beforehand, but we didn't have a way for people necessarily to share that information. And so people coming together and sharing different pieces of like what's going on with an offender often helps. With that full picture, it allows people to see better what they can do within their piece to hold that person accountable. So I think a lot of it is just the information sharing. I will say there are some things that they're doing in Massachusetts that are beyond our scope here, but I don't think that's, I don't know, I mean, I guess time will tell if that's a problem or not, but I think we have some things here that they aren't doing. We've pulled in, they're only doing their one local jurisdiction, and we've pulled in all the jurisdictions in Whatcom County. So there's some other ways that we've made it bigger. Yeah, that's a good question.
Terry?
Yeah, great report as always, but I really like the idea of the gender revolution, that conference, of the focusing on that age group of middle and high school, because as we're well aware, the roots of domestic violence and other things are well formed by that age already. And so many of us think of domestic violence as only with adults, but we see it starting with the early dating and other kinds of things, and so I think this is really an important element, to try to meet this head on. So
yeah, great.
Thank
you.
Any other questions for Susan?
Too.
Michael?
So I think one of the best things that's new is this high-risk offender program. Using empirically based, predictors of what is really a genuine high-risk situation deserves serious intervention. Was that idea in part driven by the inspiration from this Massachusetts group, or was that just brought in from some other best practice somewhere else?
So that we kind of merged 2 different programs. So one is this group from Massachusetts, and another is this lethality assessment program, which we took from a group in Maryland. And so we're kind of using 2 different tools for how to bring people in. So this lethality assessment program is about identifying survivors who are at highest risk for dangerous violence. And so law enforcement, all of our law enforcement agencies are doing those with every domestic violence call that follows that protocol. So that's a way to identify, by attending the highest risk survivors, we've also just identified the highest risk offenders. So we're using that tool to bring them in, or different agencies have their own risk assessment tools, and so then they may refer the offender that way. So we kind of brought these 2 programs together here. Yeah, good question.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Susan,
Great,
as
thank you.
always. Our next item is an ordinance amending Bellingham Chapter 10.28 Bellingham Municipal Code to authorize voluntary compliance agreements with property owners where a violation does not create an imminent risk of harm to public health or safety.
Hello,
Peter.
Peter Raffato, Legal Department. So this is before you again. This is basically an ordinance change that explicitly authorizes a code compliance tool in the form of a voluntary compliance agreement. Keep in mind, we always keep in mind that our ultimate goal with code compliance is to gain that compliance and to meet the intent of the code. This agreement really, this authorizes agreements that really provide for a workaround if there's a sort of a timing issue that is presented by something that's been retroactive. For example, I think you were provided some examples previously by Jason Napier, and the direction was to bring this back. And this is really on the continuum from education, technical assistance, monitoring, and then this fits within that continuum in terms of code compliance. And if you don't gain it, there's ultimately the actual enforcement action that can be taken. There were some changes made that James Erb, we kind of had some thoughts about, really some minor improvements, no substantive changes. I think he's going to talk about what those are, but ultimately we're presenting this now for adoption by the council.
Okay, council. Carry.
Move approval.
Second. Motion been made, second. Any discussion? Roxanne.
This is really exciting to me because in my former world, I worked with an organization called Tacoma Cares. And that's exactly what it did, is it tried to work with the property owners, because we never know. Sometimes it was an issue where it was a senior citizen who didn't have the ability to manage their property the way a younger person would. So we would create these timelines. We'd work with different neighborhood associations even to help that person get their property back up to standard and code. This is the more thoughtful way, and it's the way that I love, so thank you.
Any further discussion? Boy, you guys done good.
Yeah.
All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, the next item is a further discussion of the proposed new Whatcom County Jail facility.
I was hoping that one would take a little longer, but thank you very much for unanimously approving that last. I'm very appreciative of that. I agree with everything Roxanne said, and I think that we'll find a higher level of compliance if we do it this way. So, well, in some ways, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start with. I think that the overall public interest is to have a new jail facility, a modern facility that's safe, that's efficient, and that allows the diversionary programs that we'd like to see. Having said that, the city has been investing a lot of money in prevention. I mean, that has been our emphasis, is how to keep people out of the system. We also, as a community, Whatcom County, are investing in diversion through our mental health dollars, through part of our already jail, 0.1% jail money that we're using, through our, where is that place? Yeah, Division. I was going to say Dialy, but that's not our Division Street property, and the social service investments we've been making in the last couple of years. So we do believe in prevention and diversion, and of course, at some point in time, it's appropriate for people to be in jail. If people are in jail, they need to have safe, humane conditions. They need to have, I believe, a chance to break the recidivism cycle. And so when we talk about funding a jail, building a building is only one part of the discussion that we need to have. And I think that all of you have seen that the County Council has now taken this up, and they are talking about what does it mean to have a jail and jail services, not just what does it mean to build a jail. The County Council has, as you know, the county executive has been responding to the council, his own council's questions and requests. And one of those things is creating a group that would look at what would happen with Division Street. What do we mean by diversion services? Where would they be implemented? But those are all things that haven't been determined yet. So all along, I've heard members of our council say, I'm not ready to take a position on this recommendation until I really know what the recommendation is. And to the end that what we have been looking at as the administration at the request of the county executive is the financing. So not everything else, though that has been part of the conversation, but give us specifics on what you think of this financing program. The staff that sent this memo to me that's in your packet, we have been meeting and discussing not just the financing package, and what else comes with building a jail. Supposedly the county council is going to be asked to take a position on the 12th of May, so that'd be a week from tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes, you're right.
Tomorrow. They meet
Yep.
on Tuesdays.
Yep.
And I don't know if they'll be ready to make a decision then or not. So as of today, I am not recommending or asking you to take a position on what the county has proposed to us, because I think it's fair for you to know exactly what the proposal is that you're going to be voting on. But I think I need to be clear and very honest that the financing part of that proposal, even though we've been able to make it, the cities have been able to make it better, is probably not a proposal that I would have recommended to you if I were the person that was making the original proposal. I would have separated out the capital costs from the operating costs, and I would have probably used what I consider, which is property tax, a more appropriate way to pay for a facility. Having said that, that is not the proposal that we were asked to respond to. Even though in October we made that request, in February we made that request, but in the end, the council, the county council and the county executive are putting forward the proposal for us to respond to. And I think at the end of the day, after the council has taken their shot at it, the county council, that's when I think I could make a recommendation to you about what I think. Because then we're down to what is in the best interest of the community.
Are they still trying for spring, or is it going to be on November? Is it November?
Well, I think they have given up the choice of putting it on the primary ballot. Now they're talking about the November ballot, but that is still up to the county council to talk about. So what you have in your packet is what the county asked us to do in a narrow context of financing, responding to what we would like to see changed if in fact the 2% sales tax is what comes forward. And Peter had gone through with you in the last or past meeting alternatives that we had asked about, different funding proposals aside from a 2%, hybrid models. I mean, we have, worked our way through all of those. And so what we did was what we were asked to do by the county in this particular packet is, if this was coming forward, what changes would we like to make? And there are changes that when I went through them with the county executive, there were some that potentially could be made, but the majority were not acceptable. So I just thought I should tell you that up front also. So with that, remember, I'm not asking you to take a position. I think we should see what the county council asks. I think we've come a long way in modifying this proposal as originally presented. And I'm going to let Peter either go through the details with you on at least the first part, and then if you have any questions, I want you to, to ask him. I'm more of the what do you think that means rather than what do you think that says.
Go ahead, Peter.
So, along those lines, the memo that's in the packet really kind of has the first 6 points. I think those are sort of the overall model of what's being proposed by the county and the fundamental concept in terms of the financing, both on the capital side and the operation. The remaining points are more specific within their model. And so I'm open to any question and answer. I can go through the first 6, and I'll do that now, but I want to make sure this is useful time to the council. but I can go ahead and go through the first 6 at least. But I see those as you determine those before you really move on to some of the finer points.
And that's on page 5.
Any quick questions before we do that? Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Given the fact that this will be bumped to November, what is the county council's deadline to put it on the ballot, given the November date?
I don't recall when the auditor needs to have that resolution.
I think it's July. It's in July.
Okay. Just in terms of how many more meetings we might have on this.
Yeah, the one thing along the lines of timing that I would say is it's even the details. Even once we determine the fundamental model that's going to be used, there's still a lot of work to be done in discussions with the county in refining that, and that's kind of demonstrated in the points following those first 6 points. I'm happy to go through those points right now, just to highlight
Do it
them.
quickly. Go ahead.
Okay.
Susan Mark. Just remember Susan Mark.
Okay, I'm not that
I
fast.
know. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I don't think that fast either. So the number one is really the timing of the proposal that's already been alluded to by the mayor in terms of, we're really getting some new information real recently. There's a new task force proposed by the county executive. What's not clear in the proposed agreement is how that may be incorporated into the agreement. I don't know if there's an intent to incorporate that in any substantive way, or whether that's considered to be something separate. Point number 2, we've talked about this before, and this is the overall revenue model proposed by the county, which is the 0.2% sales tax under a specific statute. The challenge for the city in that regard is that if it's a county-wide sales tax, as being proposed by the county, that results in a 60-40 revenue split. 60% goes to the county, 40% to the cities. The 40% then is divided up in accordance with population. Now, part of the challenge is that the county then has taken that first cut at it, and then the actual amount that the county would receive, or that the city would receive back, is based on the amount of the capital payment that they would pay. So it's the beginning of the story, but it's not the end of the story. But what the difference is between the countywide sales tax versus a citywide, if the city were to choose to place a 0.1% on the ballot, which is an option that the cities have under the statute, they're only entitled to a 0.1%. But that revenue distribution is 85% to the city, 15% to the county. So that's just one of the challenges to note in what's being proposed. Point number 3 is an acknowledgement that the county, the existing 0.1% sales tax, the one that's existing for jail construction and operation, that goes under the county's proposal to county costs only. And there is not a similar, in the proposal, there's not a similar revenue source dedicated solely to the cities, except for that portion that they get back after paying the capital amount. And that amount in the first 3 years that would come back to the city of Bellingham is $400,000 to $500,000. And then in 2019, it goes up to $821,000. And it does increase over time, correct. It's based on assumptions as to what sales tax revenue is going to do over the course of those 30 years. And the amount paid for capital is a set amount in the county's proposal. Point number 4. As staff, we've talked about how the governing principle really should be equal contribution based on usage of the facility. Under the current proposal, for the first 3 years, the first 3 years in the proposed agreement, the cities would contribute to capital financing far in excess of their historical usage. And this is under the proposal, which has sort of an interim financing period for 3 years. In the remaining years, the cities will fund 28% of the capital cost, when historical usage is approximately 20%. We've talked before about there's a gap. The parties make up, I think, about 90%. The non-parties' use of the jail is that 10%. So then the question is, how do you make up that gap in the capital funding? And right now, out of that 10%, it appears that the proposal is 8% of that is being made up by the cities as a whole.
And the response that I got about that question was that the 28% includes 40%. We generate 40% of the booking charges. That was the response. It was when I asked about that discrepancy.
And lastly, the model, as discussed by the mayor, really at this time combines revenue for both capital financing and operating revenue, which just presents a challenge in terms of making sure that that it's really clearly a fair division in terms of contributing to those capital costs and operational costs. And so those are sort of the 6 fundamental aspects of the agreement that we've noted as a challenge.
Terry, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was
You all right?
mine was just up about the importance of this memo of just, I mean, this is great.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of what's out there, especially the next part, the specific items, because thank you for bringing, I mean, you hit on so many of the items of concern that I would sure like to see answered or adjusted before we approve anything. And my question is, Mayor, you say you've taken some of these to the county exec, and he's said, basically kind of pushed it aside.
Well,
what happens if we don't approve this? I mean, don't we have an awful lot of leverage to get answers to these questions and make modifications? Because what happens if we say, no, we don't agree to this because this isn't equitable?
I think what I did with the county executives, I went through each one and had an oral explanation. I did that last week. I think if the council would like actual answers to these, we probably might have some of them already. They've responded to some of these, but we can definitely ask for responses. I mean, of course we can, because we're going to be asked to support something. And so then you get into the where we started. And like I said at the beginning, where we started isn't where I would have started. And the other 6 cities, and I don't know if they've all voted yet, have they? But the other 6 cities have indicated to the executive that they will support the proposal with the changes that we were able to negotiate. So they will support the interlocal resolution that's in the packet. So, of course, you have the ability to do whatever it is that you feel is right. And I think that once we see what the county council is at, if they're willing to make any of these changes, and I would encourage all of you to talk to your county council peers about some of this. But the truth is, I believe that this is, it's an enormous responsibility to build and operate a jail. And we don't have to do that. And I have to tell you bluntly, I really don't want to do that either. That is not on my list of things to take on. Having said that, I think there can be some, there could be some of these changes that, if the county council supported them, that might, make the agreement even better. But I think when that agreement is kind of finalized, what's going to be on the ballot based on the county council's opinion, then I think we have to have a very frank conversation about do we think it's time for a new jail or not? Are we willing to take that chance? And I think that's a legitimate, fair discussion for this county or city council to have. But I guess I'd just like to know how much farther we could go with some of these changes.
Go ahead.
Well, some of these I really would definitely want answers, but some of it's is patterns we've seen before, like the interest, the use of. We have seen that in other funds where the county has used interest from funds generated for specific uses, and then they use it to run general funds as opposed to putting it towards the housing fund as they had supposed to. So, I mean, why would we accept them using interest funds from this tax base to go for anything other than the funding of the jail. There's no reason for us to accept that. And I can't see why I'd really like to know how they can justify that, or why would we want to pay for the funding of building sheriff's office? That should be separated out. There shouldn't be any of that going into that's a county issue. Like, we're not asking the county to fund, our police buildings.
And I think
there's so many of these kind of things, or just that we're paying the correct usage.
And that was a bigger issue before than it is now, and Peter can explain that.
Yeah, so just to be clear, some of these things are the kinds of things that perhaps could be cleared up with really spending some time with the county and understanding jail operations, for example, and how they intend to build these facilities. They've made it clear that as a general principle, they're not expecting the cities to pay for the sheriff's facility, but it's always more complicated than that because you're on a shared site. You have, some operational things may be really hard to ferret out and get a clear division. So it's not that they're necessarily looking to do that, but we need to want to spend the time to understand it. And once you understand it, really identify it in the agreement what that mutual understanding is, so that you don't have a issue 10 years from now as to what the intent was.
Terry, do you want to formally make a motion and ask them to respond to these?
I would like to move that administration propose these questions, the specific items in the proposed that have been raised, and that we get answers for them,
And
so we can move forward before we look at,
I'll second that.
Okay, motion been made second. Discussion. Michael?
I think these are an excellent set of questions. The top 5 really are the top 5 really big issues, and I would like to see them answered too. In particular, I'm interested if there's any openness on their side to the idea of these being passed as individual city levies under that part of the state law, as opposed to a county-wide measure. They may resist that one severely because they may feel at greater risk. I don't know. I think it would be better for us. It's important to know if they feel any flexibility on that, if they feel they have the freedom to look at a different way of funding.
Actually, my question is continuation of that. Is I want to understand how it works in regards to the process. If it is possible for us to have our own city levy, is that what you said? And I guess that's a 1%, the 1585 configuration. If we could do that separately, the city of Bellingham, or do we have to agree to the same sort of funding as everyone else does in the county? I don't quite understand the logistics of that one.
Well, that's what we've referred to as the hybrid model in the table that we've put up a couple times. So under the law, it's allowed. The way the statute is written, it's the first one to pass the resolution. So, for example, if actually the tie goes to the county under the statute, if the county were to propose a 0.2% at the same time, for whatever reason, the same night that the city council asked to put a 0.1% on the ballot, that would ultimately be a county-wide measure. But since we're in the form of negotiating and coming to an agreement, there's nothing legally wrong with saying, well, we'd like to see it in this different model coming forward, legally speaking. That's a policy question ultimately as to what is the best way to do that. But legally, you could have both of those proposals going to the voters.
And we did discuss that when we were meeting with the small cities. And I think we're the lone holdout on that. And partially it's because we have a larger exposure than the small cities do, and I understand that.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of pros and cons about putting 2 different ballot measures out there, because even if we did the 0.1%, there would still have to be another measure that would build the facility. So it would be, we would still be voting on 0.2. So that was it was more complicated than just we just put our 10th out there. But there's nothing. I mean, we have been suggesting that we would be happy to do that.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks. I have a specific question and a couple of broader questions. The Farbstein report, which was produced just a few years ago, one of the top recommendations of that report was to hire a jail planner. Was that done? That was done? There was a planning?
I think that they did have a jail planner. Now, what I've heard is there's not specific design, exactly a specific design for the jail. Is that correct? Yeah, just preliminary designs. But they did hire a jail planning consultant. I happened to, by accident, be at the meeting, the county council meeting, where they were presenting their information.
Okay, thank you. And then on to the first point regarding Monday, April 27th of this year, the city received a draft initiative on jail and EMS diversion, behavioral health, crisis intervention, triage, and recovery. That was, fairly recently. These are big buckets. These are big topics to address. And so about a month ago, we were presented with this document regarding juvenile court, detention, behavioral health services, opiate addiction outreach services, triage center, and so forth. They're just it's just kind of an inventory of assets. And then the last point, the community, I don't know who is community, who pays for this larger number here. If those are community services that pay for them, it's unclear. But back to that first point, though, of this 11th hour communication from the county regarding these other items, who will pay for those? Who's on the hook for those?
I think that what they're talking about is the county's expenses, aren't they? Isn't that in response to the county council?
Yeah, well, so there's no substantive terms in the agreement that address who will pay for that. I mean, there's a discussion, I think, in a whereas clause about the Division Street property. If it is sold, those funds will be used for a similar facility for behavioral health purposes. But as far as operationally speaking, there are no substantive terms in the agreement that address how those will be paid for.
Last item here, pursuant to item 2 here, the 0.2% sales tax, that puts us as a community in handcuffs, so to speak, for that term, 30 years, in terms of not being able to provide for other public service initiatives that we don't even know. It's hard to predict for those things. So I'm just a little hesitant in terms of being in that position of not having the flexibility to have other initiatives being funded.
Well, just based on the projections of costs that we have, and that's what you have is a legitimate concern. That's the concern I've had. The cost, the amount of money that will be generated and the rebate that we'll get, that amount of money will not cover the cost of us either providing alternatives or housing our inmates in the jails. So if we did have 0.1%, that might be something that would need to be dedicated to the same purpose. So it wouldn't be that we would have other things we could use it on unless that we can change that trend that we have now, which that's the point of investing in preventative and diversionary services, is to change that trend of the people that you have incarcerated. But it's very expensive, and Brian Henshaw could probably give you a better sense of what it actually would cost over time, because he's looked at that.
Michael?
I really appreciate the fact that Kelly keeps saying prevention and diversion. What I saw in the county council or the county is that their administration is now proposing a diversion task force. But diversion is kind of still within the criminal justice system. It still occurs if someone is picked up because they're getting in trouble for some reason, and it may be decided they need to go to a triage center or get treatment after, but they've already had a problem. It's even better to act in terms of prevention. it's even better to educate and train and immunize our youth so they don't get in trouble with drugs. It's better to have interventions available, people who are sliding into mental health problems or behavioral health problems before they're, someone's family member calls them on there, comes they're out of control. So what I'm seeing in the county's response is sort of halfway to where I think we need to be. If we really want to stop our jail from being the default mental health facility, we need to put equal emphasis on prevention and not just on diversion. So I'm hoping they broaden that discussion. And I think a lot of what we talk about here isn't just diversion, isn't just drug court, but maybe something that happens earlier so they don't even have to go to drug court. So I want that to be part of the discussion too. Keep another 100, 200 people out of the jail if possible.
Okay, the motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 7-0.
So, just to clarify, are we talking about those first 5 questions?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I should have.
That wasn't my motion.
No,
That wasn't Terry's
Terry's motion
That
was
wasn't
519 to 522.
Because those
the full memo.
specifics are really the meat of
Yeah.
the others, the general.
It's the entire memo.
Yeah, it's the entire memo.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have
Yeah.
explained that. That's what we voted on. Okay, thank you, Mayor. To be visited again, to continue. Okay, we have approval of minutes. First, we have the committee meetings we're going to have to do these separate because Jack and I were gone, and we weren't gone together, so let's just clear that up before anybody starts it. Jack and Jill weren't together that day. They did not go up the hill. Anyway, committee meeting minutes for April 20th, 2015.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Aye. Passes 5-0-2. The next was on the Lake Whatcom Joint Councils and Commission meeting on April 22nd.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0-1. Old or new business? Dan.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I went on a ride along with the community paramedic program last Monday. I spent 6 hours working with paramedic, well, not working, I wasn't actually doing yeah, I'm not qualified.
Anybody
to
goes down, you're here.
yeah, that's right. Observing paramedic Rob Stevenson, and I just wanted to share a few things. I just wrote some things, and I'm going to send this to Mayor Kelly. The program that Stevenson operates is a mobile triage of sorts, managing care for patients mostly right in their own homes. He works with a network of referring agencies that provide case management for some of our community's most vulnerable residents. Throughout the day, he manages near-term physician visits, conducts health assessments, and provides physical and mental health advice, and he listens a lot. Back at the station, volunteer Ryan Moore shows me the data that he's been collecting and analyzing about the frequent users of emergency services. High service users account for a tremendous amount of time and resources for mostly non-emergency calls, stressing a system that has to be ready to respond to bursts of activity at a moment's notice. The graphs are illuminating. There are several chronic 911 utilizers that have completely ceased calling 911 after just 1 or 2 visits from Stevenson. He educates them and he gets them connected to the health care that's better suited to their needs. This allows the emergency system, from responders to dispatch to record keepers, to focus on the critical care for those who need it the most. And the takeaway for me was clear. This program provides an opportunity to create patient-centered care, both utilizing and enhancing the safety net for people who would otherwise likely end up in the emergency department at the hospital. In looking system-wide, we all save when we invest in prevention and intervention programs. It's common sense. So I just wanted to thank Chief Newbold and paramedic Stevenson for allowing me to ride along last Monday. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Pinky?
I just wanted to give an uptake, an
A what?
uptake.
Uptake? Uptick.
It's Monday. Just an update from the LTAC committee, and just say that we had 18 proposals for our signature event. We interviewed 4 finalists, and we are in negotiation right now with a contract with the Bellingham Waterfront and Seafood Festival, who looks like they have won, and we're very excited about it. And so out of 18, we have chosen 1. So,
Roxanne.
Well, I just want to say one of the most exciting things happened to me as an elected official when I was asked to MC an event that took place at the Mount Baker Theater. Author Timothy Egan visited our community, and to the surprise and to the happiness of everybody, 1,325 people filled the Mount Baker Theater. And this was just such an exciting event. It was so special. Basically, Mr. Egan has written a book about the artwork, the photography of Edward Curtis. Curtis visited 80 tribes and captured amazing photographs of so many of my tribal ancestors and tribal ancestors from everywhere. And it was just an honor for me to be a modern-day tribal member emceeing that event. And so I just want to thank everybody who made that event possible. That was incredible. I lift my hands. Thank you.
To Jack.
Based on a request that was provided earlier this afternoon, I'd like to make a motion that we would ask the Public Works Committee to review the department policy establishing system development charges in the city. So that's a motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, I'll go and then you go. I should defer to you, but I wasn't going to say, you know what, no, I won't say that. Because I just want to thank Marie and Pinky for when my absence at the last meeting, I had an uncle and a best friend die within 2 days in California. I had to make an emergency trip. Pinky did a great job chairing the meeting, and Marie, thank you for all your help. Mayor.
Well, if we want to talk a little bit about successes, which is really nice to talk about, I think. The Mayor's Arts Awards this year, I have to tell you, I thought were spectacular. Had nothing to do with me. I was just a prop at the front of the room. The BTV10 guys did a wonderful job of putting tape vignettes of all the recipients together. And we had over 600 people in the Walton Theater. It was a little scary because I was thinking we might be overbooked, but we weren't. We checked and made sure that we didn't have too many people in there, but I think we're going to have to find a different venue next year because it was very well attended. So I just want to give some thanks to everybody who put that on, and that's it. So that was another success.
Anything else? See you later this evening.